Welcome to the September 17th Planning Commission. Roll call, please.
Mayor McManus.
Here.
Banks. Here. Caprillion.
Here.
Wood. Here. Pinker. Here. Alderperson Hendler. Here. And Rosendich is absent.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the August 20th, 2019 meeting? Motion by Mr. Caprillion, second by Mr. Pinker. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 4, citizens' comments. Anyone from the public wish to address the Planning Commission? Anyone from the public? No? All right, we'll close that. Item 5, conditional use request by David Nikolai to allow for an exception to exceed the maximum residential accessory building square footage limit with the total area exceeding 1,200 square feet and the footprint of the first floor area of the home located at 1911 West McMillan Street, parcel 250-2602-364-9928, zoned SR2 single-family residential. Presenter Evan Monson, Associate Planner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you just stated, this is a conditional use request for an accessory structure. The proposed structure is 30 by 48 in size. It total out at 1,440 square feet. On our location map, this is located at 1900 West McMillan. It's pretty much on the edge of town. If you go past the viaduct, you may not realize that's part of town still, but it technically is. Mr. Nikolai recently constructed a house and an attached garage in the property. The attached garage is 784 square feet, and so this new proposed structure puts his accessory space over our threshold as permitted in the zoning code. The total accessory space, if the proposal were to be granted, would total at 2,224 square feet of accessory space. If we go to the next slide, this is the site plan that shows the house, the attached garage, and the proposed garage. The proposed garage is shown here as being about 40 feet from the property line. It's actually going to be about 60 feet from the property line. It's also about 160 feet from the front property line for the setback. It's also set back 100 feet from a non-navigable creek that runs through the property. If the creek were actually navigable, shoreline zoning requirements would apply. In that case, you would have to have a minimum of 10 feet from the creek. This garage is more than that by quite a bit and actually exceeds that requirement by 90 feet. So regardless of the navigability of the creek, there's no concerns with being too close or too far away from that. The property is about 9 acres in size. The building coverage of the lot, if this proposal were granted and constructed, would round up to about 1% building coverage of the lot, which is pretty minuscule. The property could be further divided in the future if the landowner so desires. We go to the next slide. These are some of the elevations of the proposed structure. It would be constructed of somewhat non-residential style materials. It'd probably resemble more of a pole barn than anything. This isn't necessarily too different from a lot of the other surrounding structures in the neighborhood, though. Since we're in a more rural area, it's not really too uncommon to see something like this. We go to the next slide. This kind of just restates what I just went over for the analysis. Again, it would be 30 by 48 in size. A lot of this would be just for the storage of personal property and other vehicles. This wouldn't be for an in-home occupation or any other private business or anything. So land use isn't really changing. It's just going to be a very large garage and a very large lot. So we go on to the final slide here. Staff would recommend approving the conditional use request by Mr. Nikolai to allow for the exception to exceed the maximum residential accessory building square footage limit. The total area exceeding 1,200 square feet in the footprint of the first floor area of the home with the following conditions. Minor site changes may be administratively approved as long as the changes do not result in the development becoming non-compliant with this conditional use permit and or other code requirements, and then that the property is permitted to have 2,300 square feet of accessory space.
Thank you, Evan. This item does require a public hearing. At this time, I will open the floor to members of the public who would like to address the Planning Commission regarding this request. Anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Second call, anyone from the public? Final call, anyone wish to address the commission? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion. A motion by Mrs. Banks, second by Mr. Wood to approve. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, then all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Item 6, annexation request by Paul Lang, including a request for CMU, community mixed use zoning, related to a petition for direct annexation for 3 parcels and road rights of ways consisting of 9.49 acres to be detached from the town of McMillan and annexed to the city of Marshfield, located west of North Central Avenue and east of North Peach Avenue. Presenter Bryce Hembrook, City Planner.
Thank you, Mayor. As you mentioned, the applicant is looking to annex 3 parcels and road right-of-way. Here's a location map. Some of you who have driven by here might not have realized that this was actually town of McMillan rather than the city of Marshfield. But they are requesting to basically annex in, and this would essentially eliminate a town island, which is in the city's best interest, and also the state recommends removing town islands when applicable. Because the town is essentially surrounded by the city, except for the very far northeast corner, this would be considered a town island. The larger property is to the north of County Road E and west of Highway 97, and then across to the south, across County Road E is the smaller parcel. And then there is also an outlot on the northeast corner. This currently just has a statue on it. Both of the larger parcels are vacant at the moment. The request was brought forward due to a need for sanitary sewer and water services, as the property owner is soon looking to sell the land to be used for commercial development. The lot to the north of County Road E is proposed to be developed for a commercial use in the near future. City sanitary sewer and water services are already located near the property. They would just have to be connected to the property. All 3 parcels, one of which is the outlot, fall within the general commercial future land use category as described in the comprehensive plan. And thus, community mixed use, CMU, zoning district would probably be the best fit for, or would be the best fit for zoning designation. For each annexation proposal, Marshfield should only approve the annexation into Marshfield when certain utility and community facilities criteria and other important community goals are met. In the staff report, I kind of go into detail a little bit further, but basically to sum it up, the properties have access to the services, just need to connect. The subject properties will be suitable for commercial development. The Department of Administration has reviewed the proposal and has found that it would be in the public interest to annex. And this area falls within the city's sewer service area boundary. The city and the town of McMillan have a cooperative boundary plan. And these subject properties are located within the joint planning area. However, the properties are located in the no contest area, which means that annexations do not need to be reviewed by the Joint Plan Commission. However, at our last meeting, I mentioned it just to keep them in the loop, and there were no objections. So here's the CSM showing exactly the properties that would be annexed in. And then with that, we would recommend to approve of CMU community mixed use zoning for the annex area and direct staff to prepare an ordinance, an annexation ordinance for common council consideration.
Thank you, Bryce. This item does require a public hearing. At this time, I will open the floor to members of the public that would like to address the Planning Commission regarding this request. Anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Second call, anyone from the public? Final call, anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion to approve. Or motion from the commission. Motion by Mr. Wood, second by Mr. Pinker. Any discussion? Mr. Pinker.
Bryce, frequently the term outlot comes up in some of these discussions. Just for those people that might be listening or for those in the audience that are not aware, would you define outlot?
Yeah, offhand, I don't know the exact definition in our zoning code, but it's basically a undevelopable lot that wouldn't be used basically for anything. Essentially, it's just created so that the statue can remain on site. So hopefully that helps.
Anything further? Seeing no further discussion, please, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Item 7, specific implementation plan amendment request by Amy Cole to amend a previously approved specific implementation plan for the Prairie Run Subdivision to create a new land use type called accessory apartment to be permitted as a conditional use in the commercial district of the Prairie Run Plan Development. Presenter Bryce Hembrook.
Thank you, Mayor. So the applicant wants to build, to be allowed to build onto their current non-residential garage and make the second story into a living space as an apartment. Currently, it's just a garage used for accessory space for their business. At the moment, this is a use that is not permitted in the Prairie Run Plan Development or the zoning code. The applicant is requesting to create this land use type and define it and to allow it as a conditional use in the commercial district of the Prairie Run Plan Development. If the request is approved, then the applicant will need to return to the Plan Commission for approval of the conditional use permit to be allowed to have that accessory apartment. So just to be clear, this is for to define it and add it to the commercial district. So typically, plan unit developments enable development of portions of a site at either higher densities or with less restrictive lot provisions in exchange for preserving other portions of the site in open space or providing above normal site amenities. And then also, according to Section 1843 of the Municipal Code, the purpose of the Plan Development District is to provide for the possible relaxation of certain development standards pertaining to the underlying standard zoning district and other requirements of this chapter. In exchange for such flexibility, plan developments shall provide a much higher level of site design, architectural control, and other aspects of aesthetic and functional excellence than normally required for other developments. So city staff looked at various types of land uses that this could be considered. This is not typically a request that we've been asked here in the city of Marshfield. So we looked into some of the options to see if it fell under a land use category. It did not, but we found some similar land uses. The most similar land use was accessory dwelling units. The main difference between these two is that accessory dwelling unit, you're only allowed to have the accessory dwelling unit on the same property as a single family residence. So it didn't quite fall under because we're talking about having a business and then an apartment on it. We also looked at mixed use dwelling unit. The main difference with that is a mixed use dwelling unit needs to be located in the principal structure. In this case, it's a detached garage and not an attached one. So it would not count as a mixed use dwelling unit in this case. During the last meeting, last Plan Commission meeting, city staff asked the Plan Commission for guidance on this topic and whether this is something that they would be interested in reviewing to allow in certain zoning districts, just consider for plan developments or to not allow at all. The Plan Commission asked for a more specific example, but they mentioned they would likely be more comfortable with allowing in a plan development, depending on the specific project. This is because you can review, site specific rather than just allow for the general zoning district. City staff only found two similar examples, one in Asheville, North Carolina, and one in Brewster, Massachusetts. The one from Asheville, North Carolina is the definition that they were requesting. And then the Brewster, Massachusetts also allowed for a accessory apartment on a business property. So the applicant is essentially proposing to define accessory apartment as a separate and complete dwelling unit that is contained on the same lot as the structure of a single family dwelling or business. So staff has, and actually I'll just take a second here. Here's an example of what this could look like. So here we have the business in the top left corner. And then currently we have a garage over to the side. The garage is only one story. They would be proposing to add on to the second story. And it would just be a pretty simple layout of an apartment unit up top and then a garage on the lower part of the building. So staff has identified a few concerns with this project. First, an accessory apartment is not a land use that is identified in the zoning code as we have it today. Typically, a proposed land use would already be defined in our zoning code. After speaking with the city attorney, this did not seem to be an issue, but rather kind of an unorthodox situation. Second, there are not many similar examples in other codes. Typically, staff, we like to look at what other communities do, kind of use them as a precedence and to see if there's any issues with how they define it or if there's been issues in their municipality. And finally, the commercial area in which the proposed land use would be, this proposed land use would be allowed is mainly intended for commercial use and not necessarily intended for use by a single family. So up on the screen here, I have the map of Prairie Run development. The commercial district can be seen in green here. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of area that it takes up. But this area is traditionally commercial development. There are townhouses up here, but for the most part, just a few commercial structures. And the one where the cursor is on right now has not been developed either. The staff is recommending to deny this request for these reasons, as well as this land use. This is not a land use that staff believes should be permitted in other zoning districts, and thus we would not recommend those to be allowed as well. So we're trying to, I guess, remain consistent in that aspect. But however, with that being said, staff also recognizes the argument to be made as to why this request could be approved. This request is intended solely for the commercial area in the Prairie Run plan development. And so this land use is only applicable for these 4 or 5 properties within the whole city of Marshfield. So the chance of this use being used other than in this example is pretty low. And also the Plan Commission did mention at the last meeting that they would be open to discussing allowing this type of use with a specific site in mind. In this case, we're looking specifically at any of these locations in green here. This land use would be a way of efficiently using land to provide housing without requiring new infrastructure costs. And also the Plan Commission would have to review any proposed accessory apartments in this district. So if there is a project that doesn't seem to meet the criteria that the Plan Commission is looking for, they can either place conditions on it or can deny the project outright. And then one suggestion I would have if the Plan Commission were to recommend approval is to maybe consider adding in the definition that the owner of the property and or business must occupy the accessory apartment. I think last Plan Commission meeting was brought up if you can restrict it to just the property owner. I think that I said that we can't restrict that. However, when I looked back at our accessory dwelling unit, that is one of the regulations is to say that the property owner has to live in the either the principal structure or in the accessory. So that would be my recommendation if you guys chose to recommend approving it. However, the recommendation is that staff recommends to deny the proposed specific implementation plan amendment request by Amy Cole to amend a previously approved specific implementation plan for the Prairie Run subdivision to create a new land use type called accessory apartment due to the several reasons listed in the report.
Thank you, Bryce. This item does require a public hearing. At this time, I will open the floor to members of the public that would like to address the Planning Commission regarding this request. Anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Please, sir. Please go to the podium there and state your name and address.
Right. Hi, I'm Dr. Barry Cole, owner of Prairie Run Dental, and our intent was to just build there and live there ourselves, because we're downsizing. We already have a great big house. We don't need it anymore. The kids don't want to come home. What's the point? So that's the intent. It's really simple. We just want to keep it consistent with the community. We're already butted up with single-family homes behind us, apartments across the street. So I think it would be consistent with the theme of the neighborhood already. So, and it would look good. It looked just like our building, if any of you have seen it. It's a really aesthetically pleasing building. That's really it. That's all I have to say. I I guess I don't really understand the deny portion because it seems like this memo that we received was all speaking quite favorably about what we're trying to do. And then it says deny. And to me, that doesn't make sense. The only thing that I can come up with is that because it hasn't been done before, but so what? It doesn't really seem like a very good reason to me, but anyway, that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else, second call? Anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Final call, anyone wish to address the commission?
Just as an email that I received, I think this is when we wanted to share those during public comment. Is that right?
Sure.
Yeah, I received an email this afternoon right before this meeting, and it was a property owner within Prairie Run, and they objected to this. They don't feel that it would fit within the overall intent of the Prairie Run subdivision. I don't have their permission to share their name at this time, but I just wanted to at least express that we did receive a public comment objecting to the proposal.
All right, seeing no one else, then I will close the public hearing, entertain a motion from the commission. Their motion by Mr. Pinker. Is there a second?
I move to approve the request as stated by the applicant.
So there's so motion to approve and a second by the applicant. Okay, any discussion? Before we go into discussion, I'm a little confused on this myself because we're saying in one sense there to deny this, however, to create an accessory apartment to be committed. So am I reading that incorrectly? Because the top part of it says deny and then, but consider this.
To deny the request.
Deny the request. Okay, that's fair enough. I'm sorry, Mr. Pinker, did you have your hand up?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
When I looked through this, I came to the same conclusion Dr. Pohl did. I think the city staff has done an excellent job of selling a yes vote. And I also look at this, I guess, somewhat in the sense of Dr. Cole. This is a unique opportunity to have a unique opportunity to have a unique development. I don't want to use too many uniques there. It's something we haven't seen before. It seems to be somewhat progressive. And at least within the materials submitted for the planned unit development, should Dr. and Mrs. Cole leave that residence, there are a number of permitted uses and conditional uses that could easily move in and occupy that space. So I think this is something could be certainly deserves approval.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mrs. Banks.
I agree with Bill. Because they're doing this to live in by themselves, it's to be next to their business and seeing the quality of the construction of their business and the professionalism that they have with their landscaping. It's pristine. It's always kept perfect. I agree. I think it should be accepted.
Anything further from the commission? Mr. Capri.
What would an approval?
Can you hit your mic?
What would an approval of this request do for future requests from a precedent standpoint in other parts of the city?
Well, in other parts of the city wouldn't necessarily have to have an effect because it's more of a site-specific, site-specific review. So it wouldn't really have a precedence, but we could have people that see this and say, hey, can I do a municipal code amendment to allow this in the CMU district, and we can put this up behind, any commercial business or even industrial business. They could do that. Now we would go back and we'd review it here and we could say, yes, that's a good idea. No, that's a good idea. It wouldn't necessarily set a precedence, but it could bring up the topic in the future. And we just felt that we just didn't know. We didn't feel with where it was located that it probably wasn't meant to be allowed for the, residential. But at the same time, we weren't quite sure. I wanted to kind of present, I guess, the both sides to say, yes, this is kind of the positives and negatives and stuff of that nature. As to the precedents, it might not set one, but at the same time, it could bring that conversation up for just any person to say, oh, I would like to build an apartment in my backyard behind my business. So that's the only thing.
And think about comparing it to like downtown. You've got apartments above those, businesses there. And this proposed development does look very nice, very aesthetically pleasing, and it seems to be harmonious with everything else that's at that site. But my concern would be like, what if someone else that wants to do something similar points to this and say, I want to do this. They don't do such a nice job.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is this would have to go back to Plan Commission if you guys were to approve this, to go for the actual unit itself. So you guys would be able to say, it has to have similar building materials, or let's say you want, masonry work for the first 6 feet, or, whatever you guys want to do can be at the next Plan Commission.
I think it gets difficult to make those sort of subjective requests at times.
Right. And it very well can. I think in this case, I don't really doubt that it would look nice, because in the Prairie Run, there's a high standard. Yeah. The applicants give me no reason to assume that they wouldn't kind of bring it up to that high standard or even make it better. But at the same time, we can rely on those conditions, but it does get a little bit difficult to kind of just talk about, since I don't believe any of us are licensed architects, so we don't quite know the lingo as well as we'd like to for the requirements, I guess. But
Josh.
Yeah, I think, with staff's direction for denial, we didn't really look at applying other conditions for approval. So I think one of the things that we've done historically in a planned unit development is require a neighborhood meeting of some kind, just to get feedback from the neighbors. Just because this is a planned unit development, it's intended to have this, and there are covenants within the planned unit development. That would be one consideration. Maybe the Plan Commission wants to add that as a condition, that they work with, or at least hold a neighborhood meeting where all the property owners of Prairie Run are invited, because there is an element of this being a unique neighborhood. This is a planned development, and that with covenant. And so there's, I'm not sure exactly how the covenants are applied to the commercial component of it, but there's a lot of shared ownership or condo ownership in this development, where they do have say in how the development looks. That's just one thing maybe the Plan Commission wants to consider adding as a condition.
So the applicant would still have to go to that development and get their approval in that type of meeting,
if that were,
and then come to.
Yeah, correct? Essentially, if that's what the amendment would say from the Plan Commission, in that case, yes.
So do we have to amend that approval to include that, or is it enough just to approve?
No, I think if you want to require that, I guess I was throwing that out there because we didn't provide conditions for an approval. We recommended. So if we wanted, just from a staff perspective, thinking about it, to allow for this process to continue to move forward, I think it's a good idea to have a neighborhood. And you would have to amend that motion if you were going to include that.
Anyone from the commission wish to amend the motion? No? All right, see any further discussion then? Seeing no further discussion then, all those in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. 8, master sign plan amendment request by Custom Fabricating and Repair to amend a previously approved master sign plan for property zone GI, general industrial, located at 1821, 1901, 1908, 1920, 1929, and 1932 East 26th Street, parcels 33-05215A, 33-05214C, 33-05215C, and 33-05214. Presenter, Evan Monson, Associate Planner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an amendment for a previously approved master sign plan. You may think back to last year, I think it was when this plan was originally approved, so it's been about a year now, but Custom Fab is located here between Hume, 29th, and Veterans Parkway. It encompasses basically the entire portion of East 26th Street here, has its own basically little mini campus, you could say. Custom Fab is looking to amend their previously existing master sign plan. Continued expansion and need to further spread the word that they are hiring has created a little bit of issues with the current master sign plan, so they're looking to amendment. I would probably assume it's probably a good problem to have that you're still looking to hire and expand the business. So I guess it's not too big of an issue that you guys are coming here, but currently they're looking to add a new banner facing towards 29th Street. Go back towards the map there, they have a nice view pointing towards 29th Street, and they look to catch passerbys and let them know that, hey, they're hiring. If we go back to the next slide, they like to have a large banner to advertise that they're hiring. The banner, I believe, is sized at 160 square feet in size, but face East 29th Street. Staff would support granting the exception for the large banner. The only real issue would be mainly from a safety perspective, in that we'd want to make sure that it'd be legible. We don't want people looking over and saying, oh, wow, it's a pretty nice banner, and then swerving into the sidewalk or something crazy like that. So basically, as long as we can maximize legibility with a pretty large banner, that would be the one concern that we'd want to make sure is addressed. Along with the other exceptions, they're also looking to add future wall signage and directional signage. With them expanding their businesses or expanding their development, they'd obviously be adding more signage to let people know about the different buildings and how to get to each one. Given the size of the lots, the layout of the buildings and the campus, and that the street is essentially a dead end of this location, we would not have any issues with granting these exceptions. We'd better want to have people know where they're going instead of getting lost over there. And so if we go to the next slide, we would recommend approving the amendment to the master sign plan request by Custom Fabricating Repair to let them amend a previously approved master sign plan with the following conditions. City staff can administratively approve up to 3 temporary banners on each parcel, each being up to 200 square feet in size. These banners could then be renewed every 12 months through a temporary sign permit. City staff can administratively approve new freestanding directional signs that accesses onto the premises that are up to 32 square feet in sign area and up to 9 feet tall. The third condition, city staff can administratively approve new on-building signage, provided the signage does not exceed the maximum allowable signage permitted. And the final condition is that minor changes to the proposed signage and future signage may be administratively approved, provided the changes do not require exceptions from the sign code or conditions/exceptions approved with this plan.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Mrs. Banks, second by Mr. Caprillion. Any discussion? Mr. Caprillion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I think the larger banners would be a good idea. The ones that I've seen in the past on that building are kind of small and hard to read, and that's probably more of a hazard, honestly, because you're straining to see what's going on there. But
I would say in theory, you'd see like the big 160 number, you think, wow, that's really big. And then when you drive by the previous ones they had, it's like, oh, that's not really that big at all. And especially if you're trying to reach an audience, a considerable distance away, that adds to the fact that, you might need a bigger banner to actually get to the point across that so you're advertising. So
is 200 feet large enough yet?
I would direct that to Chuck. Do you believe 200 square feet would be large enough to advertise properly?
Okay.
Anything further from the commission? Seeing nothing further then, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Item 9, review and approval of the acquisition of property for uses of public building and area of parking vehicles located at 110 South Chestnut Avenue. Presenter Josh Miller, Development Services Director.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been a project that the staff and the council have been working on for some time. This is a property at the corner of Chestnut Avenue and West 2nd Street. It's the 110 South Chestnut Avenue. It would be a strategic piece of property for the city to acquire. It's a kitty corner from the Wenzel Family Plaza. If you stand on the Wenzel Family Plaza and you look around, and really the only property that doesn't have a very aesthetic appeal is probably this one. And the city earlier this year did recommend to extend, keep the police station where it is for future extension or for future expansion rather than look for another site. This would allow acquiring this property would allow this police station or police department to house vehicles, emergency vehicles and other vehicles there as necessary. Right now, they have a shortage of garage space for their vehicles. A lot of them are parked in that central lot. We don't have a parking issue per se in that lot, but they do take up a lot of space. Having this property so close to the police station would be an advantage in that scenario. So in the interim, it would be used for police vehicles and equipment for storage of that. Long term, this could be a strategic piece for future redevelopment or future parking expansion as needed for either Wenzel Family Plaza or West 2nd Street. So there's really a few advantages to this property, but by state statute 6223 paragraph 5, the Plan Commission is charged with reviewing any location of a public building, as well as any area for parking. And so this is really why this request comes to the Plan Commission. The council has not acquired the property yet. They have directed staff to pursue executing that effort. We're bringing this before the Plan Commission to do that. So I think what's the recommendation, I think, is just to approve the location of 110 South Chestnut Avenue for a public building and future area for parking.
Thank you, Josh. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. Wood, second by Mrs. Banks. Any discussion? Mr. Pinker.
I have great concern about this potential acquisition. I understand the police department has a storage need. I understand that this is a critical corner for future development. And this area is referenced in the staff report as a potential catalyst for future development. Yet, if we go back to approximately 2006, at that point, planning was recommended for that West 2nd Street area. And up to this point, we haven't seen any planning. I don't believe we have an actual coherent concept or coherent plan for that. Having attended a large number of public meetings, I do not recall anyone ever coming forth with an RFP for concept development. So in one sense, we are looking at acquiring a parking garage, but the future of that corner is totally undefined, other than, oh, let's save that as part of a puzzle. And I admit that these generally start at the corner of a puzzle. But yet there's the puzzle as to what is going beyond on 2nd Street. We continue to talk about 2nd Street, but what has been done? I received a letter. Somebody had asked me to review a statement that this party wanted to present at a common council meeting. And it was under the guise, you've done this a lot, so take a look at it. And it was referencing Wenzel Plaza very favorably. In fact, as we start the summer, it appears as though Wenzel Plaza is a good addition to our downtown. It attracts children and their parents or grandparents. It is an entertainment and activity spot. It's a downtown oasis. And the person asks further, will this park become by default a standalone facility? Well, default would be failure to develop 2nd Street corridor. And the acquisition of the property right now does not pose any higher use. In fact, going to a garage setting certainly is not a high use vis-a-vis the 2nd Street corridor. The second point this party makes is, second, if the police department improvements occur at the present site, will the police department and Wenzel Plaza become significant midpoints on 2nd Street? Well, this has been talked about before, that we go from the library to the baseball fields, and there is a middle, and that's where Wenzel Plaza is. We're not, what are we doing? We're acquiring something that is not backed by a plan. We had a plan, I'd say, oh, hey, that's a good idea. Let's get a hold of this property. Now, I realize a private party could come in, offer more money for that property, and do something. Hopefully it would be done in public-private partnership, so we have something that would start the 2nd Street corridor. But like I said, we don't appear to have anything afoot. If we take a look at that property and go back to past documents, the property assembly concept, which was noted in the downtown master plan, referenced 3 properties, not just one, and recognized the value of 3 properties, would be the warehouse, the Baltus site, and Coe's Machine Shop. Well, here we're dealing with 1, which is only a small part. So I'm concerned that we're not exactly fitting an important part of the downtown master plan. When we look at this, and you can look right at the staff's own report, brownfield and contaminated site are emphasized. It was recommended in 2013 that if you were to look at those properties, they would require a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental assessment. Now, we don't have any annotation of that assessment in the documents that we have to look at tonight. So if there is no phase 1 and phase 2, I'm certainly against that. If you take a look, I went through quite a few pages, and I don't see the acquisition of this property, especially as the potential of a parking lot, really fitting in with numerous items from the downtown plan and from some other documents. Again, I understand the significance of the corner property, but if somebody else wanted to acquire it, I would hope that we have cooperative effort between the city, that developer. In addition, we don't have any members of the Fire and Police Commission here this evening. Now, statute certainly notes that the Fire and Police Commission may not levy taxes, they may not purchase land, and they may not construct building. But yet there is a building involved, that's the police station, and we don't know what their intent was regarding that police station or even moving across, because we don't have a final concept on the police department. And was it their intent that that would be incorporated into the 2nd Street corridor as part of an anchor concept? Ms. Banks can see my spreadsheets. I've got a whole bunch of things. I'm led to the conclusion that I will vote against it. I do not believe that we have adequate information regarding this. The potential use is questionable. And it's also noted that there would not be any improvements taking place at the site. We look at this, no additional work is planned for the building at this time. Mayor's talked about communication, and what you perceive is what you believe. We're going to acquire a building in an area which has been designated previously as blight, underdeveloped, underutilized. I don't want to see the city buy blight and say we're going to use it for 3 to 5 years before the police department's constructed. So I will be voting against approval.
Anything further? Josh?
You just addressed a couple of those things. We did have a phase 1 done on the site. And so that did not identify, obviously the phase 1 goes through a history of the building and identifies potential contamination issues or concerns. The property owner did do a phase 2 up through 2001. So they did remediate tanks that they had that were leaking back in 1990. So the DNR did close the site. It doesn't mean that there aren't other releases or other potential issues, and those things are always a possibility. To do a phase 2, though, now would require additional money, substantial money at this point. And right now we have a willing seller, and we may always not have that. There's a lot of value there, because otherwise you're looking at eminent domain or relocation costs or other things like that. And so from a planning standpoint, yeah, we don't have a specific redevelopment plan in this area. The West 2nd Street corridor has been identified, though, in a few instances that it's need for redevelopment and a pedestrian corridor, essentially. And without controlling the property, you have limited ability to either remove blight or redevelop it in some cases. So I think that this is, given the fact that we have a willing seller and the needs of the police department, and long-term have this piece that could be strategic for redevelopment in the 2nd Street corridor, it seems like a pretty good property to control on the city's perspective.
Mr. Henley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I gotta say at least once a night, you know. You know, I've gone through a project like this once before where I think you're talking about the Wenzel Plaza. I think at that time we were talking about a building that we bought, which was totally contaminated, and we had to pay for it when we took it down. Now, the problem I have with this particular building, I'm afraid that we're going to wind up with the same thing by having to pay for the contamination that exists in that building. I don't care whether we did level 2 or not, that area is contaminated. That goes back a long way, folks. I think before I was even born, and I've been around a while. So I understand that the police department needs parking. I understand that. But at the same time, we give them parking and we take this thing off the tax roll on top of it. I don't know how we can do these kind of things and play with taxpayers' money. I don't believe we ought to buy the damn thing because, pardon me, I'll withdraw that last statement. I don't think we should buy this thing. Number 2, I haven't heard of a plan to develop that entire corridor. It's another one of those things like Weinbrenner shoes. We were supposed to have done that years ago, and it's still sitting there empty. I mean, what are we doing? We're trying to buy something. I know that the price is right and all of that, but we're going to pay a lot more in the final analysis, and I can't support it. Sorry. Thank you.
So one thing I'd like to address, because we've been through this in the council several times, is it a perfect plan? No. There are pieces. But I will tell you this. For anybody that wants to know the status of the 2nd Street corridor, please go to the EDB meetings where these are discussed. They're working on this feverishly, and it's hard with, as Pete said, with Weinbrenner and different things going on. They were making headway. These discussions are certainly taking place, but there's not one well orchestrated plan just yet. But what we do know about this piece of property is we know our police department needs space for their vehicles. We know that. We're also very clear on where the contamination is at this point, and there is contamination not only there, in many different places. But by capping it off, if it does turn into be a parking lot for extra parking for the plaza, right now we're putting ourselves in a position to where we will have options. If another buyer comes along and picks up that place, there you are decreasing your options at that time. So, I mean, is there some great orchestrated plan? No. And if it's not there, I implore you then, take that passion that you have to the EDB meetings and help them come up with with the plan, because they're working feverishly on it and doing a great job. But as you all know, these things do take time. Is this a perfect transaction? No. Is there risk? Yes. Are we being very, very extraordinarily careful with taxpayer money? You better believe it. But having said that, does anybody else on the commission have any? Mr. Crane.
So my question would be, is there a plan then, if the city does acquire this property, to market it as a developable site, and hopefully that something would be cohesive with the idea that Wenzel Plaza will be a gathering space and an entertainment district of sorts? And the second question would be, can it be redeveloped at reasonable cost given the potential contamination issues that are there? Or my fear is that this would be a parking garage for the rest of eternity.
There isn't a plan to market it at this point. I think the medium term would be to provide enough housing for the police vehicles. The alternative to a police storage situation would be to spend money to put on a garage on the police station, and that wouldn't be a cheap endeavor at all. This already has the buildings; they're upright. It's a oil change place, so it's suitable for vehicles. Long term, I think, given we don't know exactly what's there, and that would always be difficult because there's buildings there. You could do a phase 2, and if there's contamination that happens to be under the foundation, you wouldn't find it until you pour out that foundation. So, long term, it may just be a parking lot, because anytime you look to put a building on top of a contaminated site, you have additional constraints. In talking to the DNR, the best use for a contaminated site is to cap it with a parking lot. That basically means you're capping it. It's not going to be disturbed. Any soil that you did disturb, if it is contaminated, you'd have to remove and treat it as either some type of hazardous material, depending on what's found, which it does get costly. But we have run into contamination in the past, and it's not something that you want to run into, but we've had it happen under street reconstruction and other acquisition. But yeah, like the mayor said and Mr. Pinker said, yeah, we don't exactly have a perfect plan. But when a property comes for sale, you don't always have the time to make a plan. We had an RFP that had a proposal for a redevelopment site for West 2nd Street. A couple things came up with properties along that corridor in that time, so we kind of pulled back on that RFP and we didn't go forward with it. The plan was around $50,000 to do a redevelopment plan for that whole stretch. And given some of the properties that may not even fall into that category anymore because of various circumstances that'll probably be known here pretty soon, we just felt that was too much money to pursue it. Our second effort was to go with the UW students, the capstone project with the UW, and asking them to put together a redevelopment plan, kind of higher level, high concept level. Just got an email that they're not going to take our project on this year. So we'll go back to the drawing board, see what we can do. There's probably things internally that we can do to kind of incrementally move that project forward. But in the meantime, the police can absolutely use that facility for the next 5 to 8 years, however long it takes before we do a police station. Now we have a pretty expensive ticket item with a new aquatic center coming up, and that takes priority. But you can't do these large scale projects every year. You have to take some time, and we'd have to go through with an architect to design the police station and stuff like that. So I don't know that this would ever be privately owned again. This might be part of a parking lot or part of a parking lot that would serve a larger redevelopment site further west, just because of the potential contamination issues. Now, if we found after we did if we raised the building and we found that there was no contamination, yeah, it might be something that we could market and sell. And, this is the first step. There may be other buildings that we look to, as Mr. Pinker mentioned in the plan, that you need to buy one before you buy the second. I mean, typically To buy all three at the same time would be probably a challenge, but I think that this is a good first step and makes sense given the current needs and the current climate that there's a willing seller. So I think this is, there's never a perfect time, but it seems to make sense given all of that.
Mr. Himmler.
Thank you. From a personal standpoint, understand there's a need by the police department to have, storage for some of their vehicles. But at the same time, I'm taking a look at the fact that we take the property off the tax roll, pay for the property, and later on, we're going to run into some complication with things underground, and then put a parking lot on top of it? Do you realize the cost of that? I mean, what are we doing? I just can't support it. I don't care how you dress it up.
Thank you. Anything further from the commission? Seeing nothing further then, let's see, all those in favor, please say aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
No.
Opposed?
Let's do a hand vote there, just so I could. Opposed? 2, 3. Mr. Wood, are you? You abstain, so 4. So it's all right. Thank you. Any items for future agendas? No. Staff updates? Any staff updates, Josh? No. Seeing no staff updates, and motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Pinker-Senker, second by Mr. Wood. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.